And now, from the great El Paso Southwest, Newscenter 9. Ted Bender on weather, Jeff Limberg, sports, and on the news desk, Dave Garcia and Debra Beyer.
Good evening. 2 girls are dead tonight and 9 are still missing after a summer trip that ended in disaster. A church bus and a van carrying 43 people was swept into a rain-swollen Guadalupe River early this morning.
There's no comfort in Comfort, Texas, near Kerrville, where all this happened. And back in Dallas, where all the victims were members of a church group, the prayers continue. This evening in Dallas at the Seagoville Baptist Church, family and friends were desperate to find out who survived the disaster. Friends and family prayed, and sometimes the news was good.
She's okay. She's with Teresa.
She's okay, baby. She's okay.
Rescue efforts began almost immediately to save the teenagers floundering in the swirling Guadalupe rivers. Helicopters pulled some of the teenagers from trees. Most of the victims hung on and reached safe ground. But one young girl was killed when she could no longer hang on and fell. It's hard to get to them through the trees.
So what's the next step?
Go back out there and try again. The teenagers were being rescued from a Baptist church camp during a driving rainstorm. It all began early this morning, dumping about 11 inches of new water into the already swollen Guadalupe. At 8:30, their bus driver headed on to a flooding bridge.
The bus was stalled out, and the water was it was real deep, so we were going to try to get out and get to the road. It wasn't too far back, and it started washing people away.
Tonight, 2 of the survivors are still in serious condition. The others looked relieved, but some said they were worried about their friends.
I'm glad I'm here, but I'm scared for everybody else who hadn't made it yet.
The search has ended for the night, and tomorrow the Red Cross will help look for the 8 that are still missing. The mystery behind another tragic accident has been solved. 2 Holman pilots were killed when they ran up on another jet training in the skies literally over Artesia. Newscenter 9 was the first to show you the accident from southeast New Mexico last April. Today, the Air Force released this report that says a training jet with 2 pilots ran up on another plane. They rammed their cockpit into the wing of another aircraft, crushing their cockpit and killing the 2 pilots before they hit the ground. A wing was torn off the other plane, and that pilot was able to eject. He survived the ordeal. The 2 jets were lost. That cost more than $2 million.
Still another troubling problem involving a Delta Airlines jet has taken place, this one at Boston's Logan Airport. A Delta pilot took off from Montreal without clearance just as another plane was about to cross the runway. Delta is defending its pilot, saying it was a possible misunderstanding.
And former National Security Advisor John Pointexter is having troubles of his own. He sat before a critical Congress and told them that he still believes the president would have okayed his actions, even though the White House says no.
From the beginning, John Pointexter was angry. So was his attorney, Richard Beckler. In their morning Washington Post was a page 1 poll that revealed a substantial majority of Americans believe Pointexter's covering up for President Reagan. Beckler blamed committee members who have voiced that view outside the hearings, and he made a plea for Pointexter.
He has earned, and I repeat, he deserves just treatment.
Chairman Daniel Inouye struck back.
I don't think it is improper for any member of this panel to characterize that testimony as being incredible, mind-boggling, chilling.
Pointexter is also angry at what he calls deliberate distortions by the news media. He cited the first document signed by President Reagan about the Iran arms deal, the one Pointexter later tore up. It says arms for hostages, but he argues that wasn't President Reagan's intent. And Pointexter insists when the president now indicates he wouldn't have approved the Iran-Contra diversion, it merely means the president's deniability is working. Pointexter knows the president's insisted he would have said no to diversion.
I understand that he said that, and I would have expected him to say that. That's the whole idea of deniability.
Again today, President Reagan himself said nothing about all of this. His staff says he's considering a major speech once the hearings are over. In Washington, this is Steve Handelsman for NBC News.
There are legal problems for another ex-staffer in the Reagan White House. Former political director Nofziger was indicted today on 6 counts of violating federal ethics laws. Nofziger and his partner are accused of illegally lobbying the White House to win a Pentagon contract for the WedTech Corporation in 1982. The same year, Nofziger left the White House. The ex-White House aide still denies he deliberately did anything wrong.
Back here in El Paso, it's going to take some time, but it looks like the Zaragosa Bridge is going to be an 8-lane thoroughfare. Today, the State Department gave the city the go-ahead for expanding the bridge, and Minerva Baumann tells us the benefits are going in more than one direction.
The traffic at the Zaragosa Bridge has been a slow-moving 2-lane affair for too long. El Pasoans have been complaining about it since 1980. Here, goods moving from Juarez assembly plants literally crawl across the border to manufacturers and distributors in El Paso. It's a 2-way economic street that will soon be expanded when the bridge goes to 8 lanes.
And I'm sure the council will have some action to go on with the plans, and in other words, they've turned off the red light and we're ready to go.
Already, there are plans to widen nearby Loop 375 to take on the added traffic. But helping the traffic flow is minor compared to the hoped-for economic impact. This industrial park is about half a mile from the bridge. Much of the new business generated by the increased traffic is expected to come here, and that means jobs.
Okay, the industrial park right now has approximately 10 manufacturing operations that currently employ about 1,500 people. The potential for the park is between 4,000 and 5,000 people.
City planners say they'll have designs for the bridge ready within 6 months. After that, they hope to have the new bridge open for big-time commercial traffic by 1990. Minerva Baumann, Newscenter 9.
Meanwhile, authorities on both sides of the bridge have joined together to intensify the search for the man accused of shutting the boxcar that killed 18. Officials say there could be a break in the search soon because all available resources in both countries are being used. The 18 undocumented aliens were found suffocated in Sierra Blanca, Texas, in a boxcar that left El Paso. Newscenter 9's Luis Patiño and photographer Ricardo Cortez will have a special half-hour report on the tragedy Sunday morning at 10 on Emphasis El Paso, here on Channel 9. There's a lot more to come on Newscenter 9 tonight, including weather and sports.
Ahead in the world of weather, a very pleasant weekend.
And the Diablos just keep on rolling.
We're closer to a state budget.
And it's wise to look before you leap.
Texas lawmakers have finally come to a decision on how the state's budget will budget its money. The House and state negotiators have agreed on a $38.3 billion spending bill. Approval came just tonight after a last-minute compromise not to reduce state aid to public schools. The compromise goes to both houses and then, if approved, to the governor. And the federal government has turned over more than $20 million to New Mexico's land office. About $3 million of that money will go to area ranchers who lost their land when White Sands Missile Range was built. For more than 40 years, more than 100 ranch families have asked the government to reimburse them for everything the feds took. In the 1940s, they were told to leave their land within 30 days. The lawyer fighting for the ranchers says this reimbursement is a start, but he's trying to get the families an additional $25 to $50 million. He goes on to say that if Congress does that, the score will then be settled.
As Newscenter 9 told you earlier this week, Ford is having complications with some of the vehicles that are used by EMS. So after 24 fires and 5 injuries, the Ford Motor Company announced today that it was recalling as many as 20,000 ambulances to correct the problems. The recall comes after several complaints that EMS drivers were courting danger.
You like to drive an ambulance that has a history of burning up and then put an injured patient in the ambulance to transport them. At any particular time may have an incident of fire.
The recall affects only Ford's 350 chassis that have been turned into ambulances. This is expected to cost the automobile company almost $30 million. There's nothing like diving into cool water on a hot summer day. Unfortunately, through that action, too many people end up with crippling or even fatal spinal injuries. Tonight on Healthline 9, Dr. Red Duke explains how vital it is to look before you leap.
And every year I talk about it, and every year it still occurs. I see it right here in this emergency room, and it happens all over the country. Some person, usually a young person who is otherwise healthy and vigorous, is devastated by a serious error in judgment, diving into water that they knew nothing about. Now, the mechanism of injury is really pretty straightforward. The person strikes his or her head on some solid object that no one ever knew existed.
The most unfortunate victims are those that have had severe head injuries or injuries to the high portion of the spine, cervical spine, and spinal cord, where the respiratory centers are located. These individuals may stop breathing and die at the scene.
But it seems that an even greater number of these folks break their neck, the result of which is paralysis, certainly of the legs and usually the arms. And I'll tell you flat out, I don't think I have ever seen a single case of one of these serious paralyzing or damaging injuries in which the person's judgment and coordination were not altered significantly by the presence of alcohol or drugs. Now, common sense will tell you, check the water out first. Wait around and see what it's like. Don't take anybody else's advice that it's okay. You be responsible for yourself. And just because someone else dives in head first and gets away with it, doesn't mean you should. From the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, I'm Dr. Red Duke.
Always good advice, and Ted's advice for this weekend is probably just enjoy it.
You bet. Not too hot, a little breezy, fair skies,
perfect.
All the best stuff. Now, today we got up to a high of 91, and it's still warm out there with the current temperature under clear conditions at 83 degrees. The relative humidity down to 31%. Dew point at 49 degrees. Barometric pressure rising from 29.99. And the breeze a little brisk out of the southwest at 12. The morning low was 65. The high, as we mentioned, was 91, but the salient figures are those rainfall totals. Before midnight a little bit, and after midnight 1600ths, brings us up to 4.12. Over on the west side of the mountain at Coronado High School, Nate Waldrop got 900ths of an inch. I think at my home we got much more than that, and all of it in a very short period of time. Boy, did it rain. We'll be back to tell you about the dry weather this weekend in a moment. In the central part of the country, a big, long, looping cold front moves into this low centered here near Boise, Idaho, and then there's a cold front down into the southwestern part of California. Tomorrow morning, the tail of that front will go only about as far as Yuma, and tomorrow night, it'll get a little further north, closer to Needles, California. So while it's expected to drift across the southwest, it won't cause us any trouble. Matter of fact, it's going to be a fine weekend in most parts of the country. The sky cover shows clear skies from New York all the way down to Jacksonville, Florida. There is some cloudiness way up in the Northland around the St. Lawrence Valley, and it's fair all the way west to Chicago. A line of cloudiness runs from New Orleans on up to Des Moines, Iowa, but much of Texas is clear, and so is New Mexico and Arizona. The big cloudiness is in the northwestern corner of the country, extending from the Dakotas all the way to Washington and Oregon. So if you're traveling in the southwest, from San Diego and Los Angeles through Las Vegas, all the way east, it's mostly fair everywhere you go, with very little shower activity. Oh, there are some exceptions. For instance, down around the Big Bend Park, our radar will show you some intense weather activity. But nothing really close to El Paso, and there's quite a bit of rain in central Oklahoma and in a line from Kansas City all the way on up into the Nebraska landscape. Let's take a look at the southwest in detail. Nothing in New Mexico, much of it down around Sanderson, and in that area close to where the Pecos empties into the Rio Grande. On we go with temperatures in the 10 o'clock story. At Miami, it's 82. It's 74 at Indianapolis and 69 at Boston. Then to Chicago. The Windy City right now at 80 degrees. It's 82 at St. Louis and also at Little Rock. 68 at Denver and 71 at Oklahoma City. The Texas story, Fort Worth, Dallas, 83. Same at Houston and Brownsville, 83 degrees. It's 81 at Austin and 82 at San Antonio. Denver at 68, and it's a warm evening over at Salt Lake City, and it may be an error when they show 80 for Salt Lake. 59 at San Francisco and 67 at Seattle. Closer in, 83 at Deming, same as El Paso, and it's 84 at Alamogordo and 78 at Carlsbad. Tomorrow, no hundreds, 90-degree temperatures as we cool down just a little bit in the middle of summer. It goes all the way up to Chicago. The 80-degree range to the Canadian border and all along the Atlantic coast. The 70s fill out the rest of the map with two exceptions around Glacier Park and extending up the Oregon coastline to the Olympic Peninsula, no higher than the upper 60s. And I apologize for putting Astoria in the wrong state. It's in the state of Oregon. Now let's take a look at the almanac for tomorrow. The record low of 62 goes all the way back to 1881 and a 106-degree record high to 1980. No new records tomorrow, as tomorrow morning's low should be in the low 60s, 63 or 64. Then tomorrow's high, low 90s, 92 or 93. Sunday a little bit warmer, and Monday a little bit warmer than that. So with temperatures warming up and skies staying clear and the humidity going down, it looks like super weather, a lovely weekend.
Okay, we're going to hold you to it.
Did you doodle while I was doing the weather show?
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted. Well, the boys of El Paso Varsity Scout Troop 238 are out to set a world record, and some pilots celebrate in faces and places tonight. This morning, the young men loaded up a truck to head out to Black Mountain in the Gila. They will join forces with thousands of other scouts from Rocky Mountain states for Operation On Target. For the 4th year in a row, the scouts will man mountaintops, and using mirrors, they'll try to pass a light signal from Canada to Mexico. If it works, it will be the longest signal ever passed through mirrors.
And the Jedi Squadron brought in its new helicopter pilots and said goodbye to those leaving. The unit is a new part of the 3rd Cavalry stationed at Biggs Field. Pilots are ready to go to war at 72 hours notice. They started using the helicopters in battle during Vietnam, but even pilots have to have a little fun. This is their once-a-month party.
Looks like it would have been fun. Time now for some sports. Jeff Limberg is standing by. Big night for a former Diablo.
That's right. We're going to go to the big leagues later in Brewtown. A big night for Dale Swain. But first, coming up, the Diablos gun for their 5th straight win against the Tulsa Drillers out at the Dome. Plus a zinger of a day in Scotland as America's Paul Azinger shoots into the lead at the British Open. El Paso Diablos are shooting for their 5th straight win against the Tulsa Drillers out at the Dome this evening, along with trying to top Diablo right-hander Dan Murphy's shutout last night of the Drillers, 10-0. The crowd didn't get a chance to warm up the seats, though. Todd Brown parks his 11th homer of the year somewhere out on I-10. 2 men were aboard, giving El Paso the quick 3-0 lead. It was 7-0 Diablos in the 4th when Brad Hill doubles home Tulsa's first run high out the right field wall, getting it home, their first run in 13 innings against El Paso. Right-hander Luis Castillo will get out of the jam, though, getting Mike Jershell looking with the bases loaded. As we go to the scoreboard, right now Diablos are cruising 13-5. Looks like they're going to win their 5th in a row. 3 home runs in the 7th inning for El Paso. News from the Bigs concerns the latest Raider bid to try and land another player to wear the silver and black. As today, Kirk Gibson told the Detroit News that he turned down an offer from a man claiming to be with Los Angeles to play for the Raiders after this season with the Tigers. The 30-year-old Tiger outfielder played wide receiver for Michigan State in his college days. In Kansas City tonight, struggling Orioles were in town, and Lonnie Smith back in the KC lineup grounds out Willie Wilson scores, nutting it at ones. The Royals had their troubles with lefty Eric Bell getting only 4 hits off the O's pitcher. Future Raider Bo going down. 8th inning, Orioles won it, though. Eddie Murray singles to left, and the newest Ripken Billy is going to motor on around 3rd and come on to score. Good job, Billy. 3-1 was the final score. As we talked about earlier, 3 home runs for Dale Swain, the former Diablo power surge tonight. His 9th, 10th, and 11th home runs as Milwaukee takes care of California. Meanwhile, Minnesota took care of Toronto 3-2. And there you see the Baltimore score, while the Yankees' Don Mattingly set a new American League record. Ted's beloved win again. 8-4 Mattingly now. 17 home runs, 7 straight games with a homer. Detroit shut out Seattle. Frank Tanana, the former Diablo, goes to 9-4 on the year. Ken Schramm was looking for his 5th win, but was not involved in the decision as the White Sox took care of the Indians in 10. Oakland all over Boston by a score of 11-6 in the 10th. Over in the National League, Montreal beat Atlanta again 5-4. Ron Darling's having his problems. He had a lead of 2-1 going into the 9th, but Cincinnati came back to win. Philadelphia beats Houston 2-1. Games going on. St. Louis leading San Diego in the 7th. Pittsburgh the same over Los Angeles in the 7th, and Chicago is beating the Giants in the 5th. PGA leading money winner Paul Azinger is the leader after 2 rounds of the British Open. Azinger, one of the young rising stars in American golf. Overcast skies once again greeted the field today in Scotland. Golfers fought the rain and drizzle. It's getting better. Azinger displayed his iron work here on 13, dropping into within birdie range as he fired his 2nd straight 68. Nick Faldo of South Africa is just 1 shot back. This long birdie effort on 17 put him at 5 under par. Nice shot there by Faldo. Meanwhile, another Australian golfer is getting some headlines. Jerry Taylor with his fine blade work on 18. He is also at 5 under with Faldo. Here's the leaderboard. Azinger with that 68 today. He is in 1st place. Faldo with Roger Davis, the 1st round leader, with a 73 today. 4 of the golfers are tied at 4 under. By the way, Payne Stewart, you saw there, he shot a 66 today. Lee Trevino, tough time today, a 74, but he's still in the hunt. He's only 5 shots back.
Okay, Jeff, we've got a new sport for you.
Good.
Okay, here goes. A new sport has hit El Paso, so look out, horse racing.
Let's see, Dave, we've got in southern New Mexico, we've got horse racing, and across the border there's dog racing, but now El Paso has something special to offer, armadillo racing.
Yes, and Roberta Romero went to the track this evening, and she says that the animals bring something new to the racing world.
And they're off. These are just 4 of the armadillos that'll be racing this weekend. They're part of the Knights of Columbus annual charity drive. For $1, you can pick up one of these Texas beauties and race it. But that's not all an armadillo can do. These prehistoric animals are now popular actors. You may have seen one in the movie Barbarossa, or more recently, a beer commercial.
The armadillo is the original party animal. He was partying 300 million years ago. Spud's kind of new on the scene.
These soft-shelled animals may not be the most popular of pets. As a matter of fact, Sam says you might want to stick to your conventional dog or cat.
They make a lousy pet. I wouldn't recommend anybody make a pet out of one because they have real sharp claws, and they can dig through a wood door or a rug. They want to go through the rug, they'll do that. They want to make a nest in the couch.
You may not want them for a pet, but they're great racers. It takes a special touch to get them to run. The key to winning is to blow on these little hairs between the tail and the body. Then all you have to do is rev it up. But make sure you stick close to your armadillo, or it may make a run for freedom after the race. Roberta Romero, Newscenter 9.
You did that to me and I'd crawl over a wall too.
It's like the old cars. You run over it, let them go. That's it for us this week. The Best of Carson is next. Johnny's guests are Kate Capshaw and Woody Harrelson. Susan Tejeda and Tom Thorpe will have all your weekend news. We'll see you again Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.
See you Monday.